What you did was pure evil. You provided no mercy to your son and deserve no mercy from this court.
Also today, justice was delivered in a Montgomery County courtroom. A sentencing has been handed down to Al McLean, the father who murdered his 10-year-old son, Takoda Collins, in 2019. His fiancée and sister also charged in Collins' death.
What you did was pure evil. You showed no mercy to your own child. With those words, Judge Dennis J. Adkins delivered a chilling rebuke in a Dayton courtroom. His tone was steady, but the weight of his judgment filled the room. Before him sat a father whose betrayal spanned years that ended in a tragedy so severe, even seasoned reporters called it one of the darkest cases they had ever covered. But long before that sentence echoed through the courthouse, it began with a phone call. On December 13, 2019, from a modest house at 1934 Kensington Drive in Dayton, Ohio, a father dialed 911. His words should have carried urgency. His tone should have shown panic. Instead, what dispatchers heard was something else entirely. Al-Mutahan McLean told the operator his son was unresponsive. Yet his voice sounded detached, even irritated, as if reporting a nuisance rather than fighting to save a child's life. For the first responders racing to the address, that detail alone would prove unforgettable. When officers and medics arrived, the house looked like any other. The lawn was trimmed, pets were cared for, groceries sat neatly inside. Neighbors remembered hearing children's laughter from time to time. Nothing about the scene suggested a crisis. But upstairs, behind a locked door, investigators discovered what the neighbors could not see. It wasn't a bedroom, it was a space stripped bare, a place of isolation and silence. No toys, no light, no trace of a normal childhood. While life carried on downstairs, a boy had been erased from it, confined, unheard, and invisible. And here's where the questions begin. How did no one notice? How could so many warnings be ignored by teachers, neighbors, even his own mother? Each missed chance was another step closer to a tragedy that should never have happened. This isn't just the story of one family. It is the story of systemic failure, hidden abuse, and the devastating price of silence. Before we continue, please note this case involves sensitive issues of child mistreatment. If you're new here, welcome. Consider subscribing. And to our returning viewers, especially those who share, like, and comment to spread awareness, thank you. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Takoda Collins was born in August 2009 in Dayton, Ohio. His name given to him by his mother, often translated from Lakota as friend to all, reflects how relatives described him in early childhood. Gentle, soft-spoken, and eager to please. In those first years, he lived with his mother, Robin Collins, spending time between her home and nearby family. Loved ones recall a shy boy who watched the world carefully and clung to routine. In 2012, when Takoda was 3, a county court transferred custody to his father, Al-Mutahan McLean. The decision followed concerns about stability in Robin's household. Court records at the time show McLean already carried prior convictions, including assault and strangulation. Even so, the judge granted him custody with the expectation that he would provide consistent care and a controlled environment. The order also authorized McLean to relocate out of state to Pennsylvania if needed for work or family reasons. What happened next set the structure of the home where Takoda would grow up. Rather than moving to Pennsylvania, McLean established residence back in Dayton. Within months, he presented a new family unit to neighbors and acquaintances. Himself, his fiancée, Amanda Hins, and Takoda. Hins took on daily caregiving duties alongside McLean. The relationship advanced quickly, and the couple soon had children together, further cementing Hins's role in the household. A short time later, Hins's sister, Jennifer Ebert, became a regular presence and eventually part of the home's routine. Ebert's role started as extended family support, helping with rides, errands, and childcare when needed. Over time, both women's responsibilities expanded, and the home's rules, schedules, and permissions flowed through McLean. Visitors saw a blended family with clear hierarchy. McLean set expectations, Hins handled much of the day-to-day, Ebert filled in where gaps appeared. Key administrative steps during this period shaped oversight. McLean had court permission to move out of state, but chose Dayton. That choice reduced interstate follow-up that might have occurred with a Pennsylvania relocation. Paperwork listed him as the primary decision-maker for schooling and medical needs, and he presented himself to agencies and service providers as the point of contact for Takoda. By the end of 2012, the picture was set. A father with legal custody, a fiancé acting as primary caregiver, and a sister-in-law assisting in the margins. To outsiders, it looked orderly. Bills paid, routines established, and a guardian who appeared organized on paper. For Takoda, it meant his daily life would be shaped almost entirely by the three adults inside that home. In 2015, Takoda Collins was enrolled at Horace Mann Elementary in Dayton. From his first semesters, staff documented concerns that went beyond typical adjustment issues. Teachers noted persistent hygiene problems, a tendency to keep to himself on the playground, and a guarded manner in class. The school responded with practical support, fresh clothing when needed, quiet check-ins, and invitations to small group activities, while documenting each intervention in routine reports. Faculty tried to coordinate care through the nurse and counselors, but contact with home proved difficult. When staff requested routine wellness checks at school, Almutahan McLean often reacted sharply. He questioned the need for examinations, pushed back on counseling offers, and insisted that any discussion about his son go directly through him. Teachers recorded that he demanded daily updates and disputed even minor classroom notes. The message was consistent. All gatekeeping for Takoda would run through the father. As the 2016-2017 school years progressed, patterns grew harder to ignore. Takoda's social withdrawal deepened. Assignments came back incomplete more often. Educators met, compared observations, and escalated their concerns to Montgomery County Children's Services. By then, multiple referrals had been filed, describing hygiene, isolation, and troubling changes in demeanor. Caseworkers opened inquiries, but each time, the outcome returned the same: not enough to remove the child. By 2018, tension between home and school was constant. When staff scheduled support meetings, McLean challenged their necessity. He objected to nurse visits, canceled conferences, and argued against outside counseling. In May 2018, he withdrew Takoda from Horace Mann, informing the district he would provide homeschooling. District staff documented the withdrawal and forwarded their existing concerns to Children's Services, flagging that Takoda would no longer be seen daily by mandated reporters. The removal from school did not quiet worries. In spring 2019, a teacher who had worked with Takoda, Emily Carter, submitted a written report to Children's Services. She cited the sharp decline she had witnessed during his final months at Horace Mann, and the fact that, after withdrawal, no one at the school had seen him. Carter's letter joined a growing stack. By the end of 2019, records reflected approximately 17 separate referrals tied to Takoda's welfare. Each produced a short-term check, and each closed without removal. Law enforcement contact was not absent. Between 2016 and 2019, Dayton police were dispatched to the Kensington Drive residence more than 10 times for various calls. Yet those responses did not translate into sustained access to the child or a coordinated plan across agencies. Reports moved in parallel. School logs in one file, patrol summaries in another, Children's Services notes in a third. Without a unified view, patterns that were obvious to classroom staff remained fragmented in the larger system. During this period, Takoda's mother, Robin Collins, repeatedly called for welfare checks. In requests to dispatch, she asked that responders speak with her son privately, away from the father, so he could answer freely. Those pleas generated visits, but they did not trigger a durable safety plan. The core gap persisted. Agencies saw moments, not the full picture. By late 2018, Takoda wasn't just behind in school, he was deliberately being hidden from the world. In November 2018, the hidden reality of life inside the Kensington Drive home nearly came into view. Takoda Collins, then 9 years old, made a desperate attempt to flee. He jumped from the attic window, a risk that showed the urgency of his situation. Neighbors later recalled the sudden commotion, the kind of scene that demanded explanation. For the first time, outsiders were confronted with a glimpse of what might be happening behind closed doors. An ambulance was called, and Takoda was taken to the hospital for evaluation. What followed, however, revealed how determined those in control of his life were to maintain a facade. At the hospital, Amanda Hins, McLean's fiancée, presented herself as Takoda's mother. She answered questions, managed paperwork, and projected an image of a parent guiding her child through treatment. In reality, she was concealing the boy's true circumstances. Doctors who examined him recommended psychological counseling, recognizing that his actions pointed to deeper distress. Medical staff noted that this was not a simple accident. Jumping from a window, they stressed, reflected an urgent need for support beyond basic medical care. Yet when counseling referrals were offered, McLean and Hins refused. They told staff they would handle his care themselves and declined follow-up. Children's Services was notified of the incident, but once again, the agency closed the matter. The official note cited insufficient evidence to remove Takoda from the home. Despite the obvious seriousness of the situation, no meaningful intervention followed. This moment, like so many others, slipped away without decisive action. What should have been treated as a turning point instead became just another missed opportunity. When a child risks everything to escape, that's not acting out. It is a desperate cry for help. Every parent, every teacher, every neighbor, every law enforcement officer must recognize these signs and take them seriously. Silence, hesitation, or dismissal can cost far more than anyone is prepared to bear. December 13, 2019, began inside the Kensington Drive home much like other days had for Takoda Collins. He was confined to the attic space, under the rules and controls set by his father, Almutan McLean. Surveillance equipment monitored his movements, and the adults downstairs, McLean, his fiancée Amanda Hins, and her sister Jennifer Ebert, kept constant watch. What appeared to outsiders as an ordinary Friday was, for Takoda, another day in a cycle of punishment and control that had stretched on for years. By mid-morning, Takoda's physical condition was deteriorating. The reasons became clear once investigators pieced together the months leading to that day. He was kept isolated in an attic room, denied adequate food at times, and deprived of normal sleep. The surveillance setup ensured that every move he made was scrutinized. Even small acts, like shifting out of place or asking for a bathroom break outside a set time, could result in punishment. This relentless environment weakened him physically and mentally. By December 2019, he was underweight for his age and no longer had the stamina of a healthy 10-year-old. On the day of his death, those punishments escalated. McLean demanded compliance with rigid rules, punishing what he perceived as even the smallest missteps. Detectives later documented that McLean had a pattern of forcing Takoda to stand for long periods in stress positions, sometimes holding objects as a form of endurance. If McLean believed Takoda had disobeyed, he would order harsher measures, submerging him in cold water as a form of intimidation and discipline. Witness testimony and court records later confirmed that water was used not for hygiene or play, but as part of repeated punishment routines. This combination of physical strain and fear left Takoda in a dangerously weakened state. Investigators also found that McLean used methods of restraint that made it impossible for Takoda to breathe normally. According to the coroner's report, compressive asphyxia was a direct contributor to his death. This term describes what happens when pressure on the chest or body prevents the lungs from expanding. In Takoda's case, that pressure came from being pinned and held in ways that restricted his ability to draw breath. Without the ability to inhale properly, oxygen levels fall quickly, and vital organs begin to fail. Combined with the trauma already inflicted and the use of forced water submersion, this restraint pushed his fragile condition beyond recovery. By early afternoon, Takoda's condition worsened to the point of being unresponsive. At 3:42 p.m., McLean placed the 911 call. Instead of a frantic plea, the dispatcher heard a detached voice, irritated more than alarmed. McLean described his son as unresponsive, offering little detail and no sense of urgency, and in the same breath, tried to shift attention away from himself. He told the operator that Takoda liked to eat his own feces and would lie in his urine, framing his son's condition as if it were self-inflicted. Investigators later recognized these statements as an attempt to deflect responsibility. Paramedics arrived quickly at Kensington Drive. They found Takoda upstairs, his body showing clear signs of trauma. Despite immediate medical efforts, he could not be revived. He was declared deceased shortly after. The Montgomery County Coroner's report would later confirm what first responders suspected that day. Takoda's death was a homicide caused by a combination of blunt force trauma, compressive asphyxia, and water submersion. Each factor on its own was dangerous. Together, they proved overwhelming. This was not a sudden accident, nor a single moment of anger. It was the culmination of systematic abuse that reached its final point on December 13th. For investigators, the details of that day erased any doubt about the scale of McLean's cruelty and control. For the community, it was the devastating proof that warnings long ignored had ended in tragedy. On December 14th, 2019, detectives moved fast. Search warrants were executed at the Kensington Drive address. Al-Mutahan McLean was taken into custody, along with Amanda Hins and her sister, Jennifer Ebert. The scene was processed, photographs were taken, and household electronics, including the surveillance setup, were seized for analysis. Detectives secured medical records and began the timeline. Who was with the child, when the calls were made, and how the day unfolded. McLean's first interviews set the tone. He did not accept responsibility. He claimed Takoda harmed himself and insisted that any injuries were the result of the child's actions or clumsiness. When pressed on the rigid rules inside the home, he framed them as discipline and structure. Investigators noted the distance in his explanations and the contradictions between his account and the physical findings already documented by first responders and the coroner. Hins's statements shifted the picture. In her interview, she acknowledged that daily treatment of Takoda followed McLean's orders. She described routines that required strict compliance and admitted that consequences were imposed when the child did not meet expectations. Her account placed McLean at the center of the decision-making, setting rules, directing punishments, and controlling access to the child. She also confirmed that a camera feed allowed the adults to observe the attic from downstairs. Ebert corroborated the monitoring. She told detectives she watched the feed when asked and reported infractions to McLean or Hins, talking without permission, shifting from an assigned spot, asking for the bathroom at the wrong time. Her role, as she described it, was to relay what she saw. That admission aligned with the digital evidence recovered from the system and with messages exchanged among the adults about enforcement. As statements accumulated, detectives compared them to the coroner's preliminary findings and to the timeline built from phone records and device logs. The accounts from McLean, Hins, and Ebert increasingly diverged from the medical evidence and from each other. The picture that emerged was not of a sudden crisis, but of ongoing control and isolation that intensified over time. Parallel to the criminal investigation, caseworkers produced agency records. The file showed approximately 17 prior referrals tied to the child's welfare. Reports from teachers, school staff, and concerned parties had been opened and closed over several years. Investigators noted that police call histories to the address did not reliably merge with those children's services files, highlighting gaps in information sharing that left no single agency with the full view. Because of the sensitivity of the case and the involvement of a minor, the court imposed gag orders and sealed key filings. Public access to specifics remained limited through early 2020, while the grand jury reviewed evidence. It was not until May 2020 that indictments were returned and more of the investigative record could be referenced in open court. And when the courtroom finally heard the charges, even seasoned prosecutors called it monstrous. Nearly 2 years after Takoda's death, the case reached its conclusion in a Montgomery County courtroom. On September 8, 2021, the man at the center of it all, Al-Mutahan McLean, stood before Judge Dennis J. Adkins. After months of hearings, sealed evidence, and legal maneuvering, McLean entered guilty pleas to charges of murder, rape, kidnapping, and child endangerment. With those admissions, he avoided trial but sealed his fate. Judge Adkins sentenced him to 51 years to life in prison and classified him as a Tier 3 sex offender, the highest designation under Ohio law. The courtroom that day was silent as Judge Adkins addressed McLean directly. His words cut sharply. McLean's actions were, in the judge's words, pure evil and deserving of no mercy. It was a moment that underscored not only the severity of the crime, but also the years of warnings that had been ignored before Takoda's death. McLean was not the only one held accountable. His fiancée, Amanda Hins, who had taken part in the daily enforcement of rules and who posed as Takoda's mother during a hospital visit years earlier, also faced judgment. She pled guilty to involuntary manslaughter and child endangerment. Judge Adkins sentenced her to between 22 and 27 and a half years in prison. Hins's sister, Jennifer Ebert, admitted her role in monitoring Takoda through the surveillance camera and relaying reports to McLean. She pled guilty to involuntary manslaughter and child endangerment and received an 8-year prison term. Montgomery County Prosecutor Matt Heck Jr. addressed the outcome, describing the case as one of the most disturbing his office had ever prosecuted. Assistant Prosecutor Linda Dodd added that it stood as a clear example of both cruelty inside a home and failure outside it, where multiple systems meant to protect a child did not act in time. By the end of sentencing, 3 adults were headed to prison, but the words spoken in court that day made it clear. No sentence could undo what had been taken from a child who should have been safe.
First here tonight at 10, the man accused of murdering his son in Dayton in 2019 pleaded guilty in a Montgomery County courtroom today.
Along with him, his fiancée also pleaded guilty for her involvement in the boy's death.
Prosecutors said that today's plea agreement might finally close the chapter in 10-year-old Takoda Collins' death. They said his life was filled with darkness. Court documents stated that the boy was locked in an attic and was abused daily for several years. And additionally, detectives believe that moments before his death, he was held underwater and almost drowned.
He didn't find peace in life. We are hopeful that this will bring some peace in his death.
Wednesday afternoon, 10-year-old Takoda Collins' father pled guilty to murdering his son. In addition to the murder charge, McLean also pled guilty to kidnapping, rape by force, and 3 counts of child endangerment.
Mr. McLean was the primary abuser of this child. He beat him on his day of his death. The rape occurred on the date of his death, and that was brutal and vicious.
McLean's fiancée, Amanda Hines, pled guilty to involuntary manslaughter and multiple counts of child endangerment for her involvement in Takoda's death.
She was every part a complicit, which means to aid, to abet, to assist. Without her spurring him on, without her participating, and when Takoda should be punished and abused, it wouldn't have happened.
Court documents say the abuse, which Takoda endured for several years, came to a brutal end December 13th, 2019, when McLean raped and beat his own son to death. The Montgomery County Prosecutor's Office says they're relieved to see both defendants behind bars.
Our goal through the investigation and through the prosecution is always to seek truth and to find justice for the victims. These 2 belong incarcerated.
Justice has been afforded and obtained for Takoda Collins. Defendant McLean, the victim's father, was sentenced to life imprisonment and will not be eligible for parole until he has served a minimum of 51 years in the penitentiary.
Although you admit what you did, I do not believe you fully understand the depravity of your actions in torturing this innocent child. Instead of acting like a mother and protecting Takoda, as a mother should, you either participated and you further facilitated the isolation, torture, and the resulting death of Takoda.
Services, the hospitals, the police, the prosecutors, schools, we all work together, work hand in hand to protect children.
Dayton did not look away. Within weeks of the tragedy, residents gathered for public memorials to mourn Takoda and to confront the hard truth that the system had failed him. Vigils were held on cold evenings, with candles lit and voices raised in sorrow and anger. On August 27th each year, Takoda's birthday, remembrances have continued, ensuring his name is not forgotten. Out of this grief came organizing. A grassroots advocacy group called Takoda's Call was formed by community members determined to turn outrage into action. Their mission was simple but urgent: to push for stronger protections, more accountability, and a child welfare system that listens when concerns are raised. The group became a bridge between citizens and lawmakers, ensuring Takoda's story remained part of the conversation at every level of leadership. At the State House, that pressure took root. In February 2022, Governor Mike DeWine signed Ohio House Bill 4 into law, with Representative Phil Plummer as a key sponsor. The legislation was shaped directly by Takoda's case. It mandated stronger information sharing between children's services, the courts, and law enforcement. Precisely the gaps that had failed Takoda. It also required every county to regularly review their procedures to ensure agencies were working together. Perhaps most importantly, the law established a Youth and Family Ombudsman Office, giving families and concerned citizens a direct line to report problems when traditional systems fail.
Robin Collins was one of dozens of people to attend today's vigil for Takoda at Westminster Presbyterian Church in Dayton. While several investigations remain open, many in the community wanted to honor and remember Takoda.
We can't let it go without saying, thinking, doing something, talking about it.
Dozens of people, many of whom never knew Takoda Collins, gathering to grieve his death Sunday. The memorial service broken into 3 segments: a call to care, a call to grieve, and a call to action.
There's going to be a lot of questions for young people, and reassuring them that that they're safe and that everybody does everything they can so that things like this don't happen.
State Representative Phil Plummer says he's advocating for change at the State House.
I'm going to be his voice from here on out, because people tried, they spoke out, they called, and they have to be frustrated, but we just can't let this happen again.
But that could take a while.
Time frame probably 4 to 6 months. Everything's slow, unfortunately, but we're going to be on it. I'll watch every step of the process.
Several investigations are underway. The county is assessing how Children's Services handled Takoda's case. The state is also looking into how it was handled, and Dayton police are in the middle of a criminal investigation. In the meantime, a community action group is formed. Their first meeting is in 2 weeks.
We've all been touched by this tragedy, and again, if we can come together for this, we can come together to take action to prevent.
By May 2022, House Bill 4 was in effect across Ohio, a clear legacy of Takoda's short life. Reforms came at the local level as well. The Dayton Police Department revised its policies on child welfare checks. Officers were instructed that it was no longer enough to knock at the door. They now had to physically see the child during a welfare visit. If access was blocked, police were required to seek a warrant. This change addressed the very failures that had once allowed reports about Takoda to close without real resolution. There was also accountability in civil court. In May 2021, Montgomery County agreed to a $3.25 million settlement with Takoda's estate. The settlement acknowledged failures and went hand in hand with a pledge to implement operational changes within Children's Services. Together, these responses, the vigils, the advocacy group, the new state law, local police reforms, and the settlement, formed a tapestry of change born from loss. The community's grief became a movement, and that movement reshaped policy. The most haunting element of this case is not that the threat came from a stranger. It came from the person entrusted with care. The betrayal of trust inside the Kensington Drive home is a reminder that danger is not always obvious, and it is often hidden in plain sight. The warning signs had been there all along. School withdrawal that cut a child off from daily oversight, a refusal of counseling that professionals had recommended, secrecy around his living conditions, isolation that became the defining feature of his life. Each of these signals carried weight, but together they formed a pattern that should never have been ignored. This case underscores the importance of vigilance. Teachers must be supported and believed when they raise alarms about a child. Neighbors who notice unusual patterns should report their concerns, even if they fear being wrong. And parents and caregivers everywhere must be cautious about the environments they place their children in, ensuring safe boundaries and accountability at every step. In the end, the message is simple but vital. One call can save a life. If you believe stories like Takoda's should never be forgotten, please subscribe and share this video. Your support helps raise awareness, fuels reform, and reminds us all that protecting children is everyone's responsibility. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because the more voices we gather, the louder the call for change becomes. Thank you for sticking till the end to hear about little Takoda's story. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.